Good afternoon. Welcome back to another rendition of the B&H virtual event space. We're diving back into the conversational thing here. I told you guys yesterday I wanted to start doing more of these artist conversations. So here we are, back, interview two, day two. Today's event is sponsored by Leica. So I would like to thank Leica not only for sponsoring this event, but for also providing that beautiful video feed that Jason Roman is coming to us now with. Jason, what camera you got hooked up there?
Oh man, actually it's funny because last minute I was kind of scouring what I was going to use, and I usually use like a normal webcam, but I wanted to step this up a little bit, so I plugged the SL2 in, and straight away this is what I got. So I was like, yeah, this looks the part.
We're off to a great start. He comes on my show and shows me up right from the second the cameras turn on.
I'm
I love it.
sorry, man.
Nah, that's why we got you here, man. Huge fan of your work. So we're gonna dive right in. And for those of you out there watching, you know the deal. Get your questions in. Jason and I would love to get them answered for you. But we're talking shop today. We're talking influence, inspiration. We're going to talk about the difference between the two. So we're going to dive in. We're going to get a chance to look at some of Jason's images. If you guys don't follow him on Instagram, he has his Instagram right there. STOCKEZY. So definitely shoot him a follow on Instagram. But Jason, I want to dive right in. We're
Yeah,
talking
let's get right into it. I'm happy
inspiration
to.
and influence. What's your inspiration? I mean, what inspires you to first pick
Well,
up a camera?
what inspired me? Actually, the first time I bought a camera was I was studying acting, and a friend gave me a camera because I wanted to shoot like some web format series or something like that and put it on YouTube. And I was tired of auditioning for roles, so the desire to own a camera came from creating my own art, right? And then I realized I had to wait for people to create that art, and that wasn't fun. And I actually didn't like the fact that I was dependent on other people. So one of the things that I noticed sitting around my apartment was this book, Bruce Davidson's Subway book, which to me is like one of the greatest depictions of New York in the 80s. And it never occurred to me to take photos with this camera. I'd always shot photos on my cell phone, and I've looked at this book, loved it, but it never was like, go make that, go try and attempt to do something like that. So this one day I was like, I'm gonna take my camera outside and take some photos. And like anybody who's ever tried to take street photography or do street photography for the first time, it's like the most awkward experience in the world. You're like, what am I looking for? Who am I looking for? Is everybody paying attention to me all of a sudden because I'm holding a camera? You feel like all eyes are on you because you have a camera. But on my way to go create some street photography from my inspiration, Bruce Davidson, I ended up creating something that I think was influencing from Instagram, because I'm born into photography and video through social media. I didn't own a camera before all that. So I think the reason why I'm so interested in this topic is because a lot of the things with my photography get really wound up and tied up in knots with social media. And part of my process with photography is untying those knots, because they can be very pervasive. So yeah, I included in this mix of photographs an image that I created on my way, inspired by Bruce Davidson, influenced by social media. I created your silhouette, your famous silhouette photograph, man in the shadows, bright wall, kind of graphic nature image.
Man, you kind of set the table perfectly right there. And an interesting conversation already coming into the fray here in Instagram, social media. It's such a convoluted, oft argued about topic when it comes to photography, especially. What's your views on it? I mean, a lot of people now are moving over to Twitter. They're like, Instagram's not really for photographers anymore.
If I don't want, when I say the inspiration versus influence thing, I want to be careful, because I'm not trying to bash social media at all. Like
Mhm.
I don't feel either way about it. I don't think it's negative. I understand the benefits of it. Like I couldn't imagine um, being where I am today if I didn't have the ability to share my work. So everything that I have, I basically owe to social media and YouTube, and I'm not confused about that at all. But I think practicing proper usage of social media is important when you're someone that's trying to create work that's meaningful or establish yourself in a meaningful way. Because you think about the way that you consume, you can sit on your phone and swipe and consume 500 photos, or you can sit down with a really good book of 120 photos. That impacts you completely differently. And I think for someone like me, who I think I'm starting to establish a style that's very notable, but it's so easy to be scrolling one day. And I have a lot of friends who are incredible photographers, and I see their work and I can get pulled into it and say, I want to create images like this. But some of the practices that I have to be inspired, I create mood boards and things of that nature, so that I can kind of essentially have my North Star of like, why are you taking photos, and what eventually do you want to leave in this world when you're not taking photos anymore? And that kind of helps ground me and bring me back to my inspiration.
Well, speaking of your North Star, we're lucky enough to have a copy of, I don't know if this is one of many North Stars that you have. Is
Yeah.
this, I'm sure you got one for let's go in here. And you guys should be able to see this. Jason, you're able to see the screen here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I see this.
Perfect.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
this is something that Jason sent over to us, and I was hoping we'd be able to work this into the conversation
Mm.
because when we're talking inspiration, obviously those that came before us are a huge inspiration to what we do. Um, Talk us through some of these images, what they mean to you.
Well, okay, so these are things that I constantly reference in life. I'll be walking around and I'm stopped in my tracks because the things that I'm seeing are reminiscent of the images that I put on here. I put this together before the call just to kind of give an idea of the things that I look for or that inspire me when I'm out photographing. And at the top, you see you have Bruce Davidson's Subway. And not only do these moments inspire me in the way that he captured New York, but there's the color that also stands out to me. It's very specific, and you don't see this type of color. Obviously, photographing the subway at the time, they had those fluorescent bulbs. He went as far as to get like filters, magenta filters to offcast, to like throw off the balance of those green lights from the fluorescent bulbs. But the colors are so rich. So for me, my background when I first started photographing, I had the pleasure to photograph assist Norman Jean Roy. I don't know if you see this kind of James Dean-esque photo in the center there. So for about a year and a half, I assisted Norman Jean Roy, and I love his style, this editorial color grading process. So for me, when I shoot, these images stay in my head because I'd like to marry my documentary style street photography to this type of color and my background in portrait photography and assisting in that world, because that I think would define me and my style. So these are things that I use to try and remember that are emotionally impactful. Of course, we have like Louis Draper in the bottom right corner. We have Gordon Parks in the top right, and also in the bottom right, bottom left. And then you got Richard Avedon, which are these are just standard portraits that I think convey a lot of emotion. And obviously, these are posed, so this reminds me that you don't always have to go for the candid moment. You can make impactful work when you engage with your subjects, and I think that that's something that's really important to me as a photographer because I photograph for the people. I enjoy talking to people. My camera is literally a passport to everywhere in this world, and it's an invitation to interact in a city that can be pretty cold at times. Um, I always said one of my favorite things about documenting New York City was getting caught taking a photo, because I always had the best conversations with people after getting caught.
Is there a lot of does that happen more often than not,
Oh, it
conversation, or is
happens
it
all the time, man.
really?
I
Because
love it.
I find a lot of people, it's like you get caught and people just keep it moving, and or they give you that awkward look that gives you a great photo, but there's not much interaction after.
I
Tell me.
might say something to somebody because they caught me, you know what I mean? Like something to kind of dispel the tension, because I don't like to just leave things open-ended. It's like the period at the end of the sentence. This happened once I was out photographing, and this woman was crossing the street with her mom, and they were just wearing these kind of scarves on their head, and the mom was elderly. And I mean, I was all the way across the crosswalk, and I had my camera and I picked it up, and this woman just locked eyes with me. She's and I was like, am I not going to take this photo? Am I going to take this photo? As soon as we passed, I lifted up my camera and she looked at me and the scowl on her face, and I shot the camera, and we passed each other, and I was like, you knew I was going to take that. And she's like, she started laughing. She's like, and then her and her mom kind of parked, and they came over and just started talking to me. She's like, yeah, I photographed too. She's told me that she works on the board for the park at Washington Square Park. And we just had a conversation for about 15 minutes with two people that I probably would have never interacted with in my life. And I just love having those moments every day.
It's so interesting to see that. It's like I said, a lot of people when they get caught, it's like panic mode. It's like, oh, put the camera down,
Yeah.
or you do. Look, I'm guilty of it. I'll do like the look in the distance, and then they turn their head and they look behind to see what I acted like I was taking a picture of. But
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, it's as street photographers, again, it's always different schools of thought. One of the schools of thought is, blending into the scene, keeping everything candid.
Mm,
And one of the things that I love about your style and your photos is you can see your personality through your images. It's a
mm,
mix of candid moments. I think you have a very good control of when to pump the brakes and stay back and be part of the scene, and when to engage.
mm.
Is that something that you take? Is it about the moment? Is it about the person? Is it just something where you're like, a feeling?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we have to think about all the time. And I ask a lot of people that I go on photo walks with, I always ask, why do they take pictures? And not just like, why do you own a camera, but like, why do you take the photo that you just took? You know? And there was a moment where I started to think about that. I was photographing with a good friend who, his name was Eddie Keaton. He actually won a Pulitzer Prize for a photo that he took during September 11th, and he recently passed away. But while we were out photographing one day, he was kind of imparting some knowledge on me. And one of the things he said, anybody can take a pretty photo, but can you take a meaningful photo? And that kind of changed the way that I thought about photography from that moment on, because at that time I was experimenting more with color, and he was somebody that I respected an immense amount. So when he said that to me, I was just like, I want to dive in to the city just a little bit more and engage with people. So for me, I walk around all day long looking for someone that reminds me of a version of New York that I grew up with. And it's incredibly difficult to find. And sometimes these people feel like embedded in the scene.
Mm.
It's one thing that the photos that I take, the background, them, they look like they might have been sitting there for 20 years. And that just screams New York to me. And that's when I get really excited and I have to engage with people like that. Sometimes I use an icebreaker of being like, "Are you from New York? You born here? Oh, you're a New." You know, people love that. Like asking somebody if they're a New Yorker gets them excited. So I'll stay, I'll talk, I'll have conversations, and I'll engage with them for as long as I can, and I'll get those moments. But also, I do pay attention to the moments. Right now, I photograph everything, but what I choose to share is what I think is the direct connection to what it is I want people to see about New York.
Interesting. Do you find New Yorkers are a different breed? I know we always come in. There's New Yorkers, they've changed, right? The old
Hmm.
school New Yorker isn't the same as the
I
new
love
New
the old
Yorker.
school.
Is that what you're looking? You're looking like grew up in Brooklyn in the '70s and still here, and
I mean, even the Lower East Side was a pretty gritty place, right? You could
yeah.
find people all over, but like, there's old school New Yorkers, and there's still that old school mentality that a lot of younger New Yorkers have, and it's the gift of gab. You know what I mean? It's the engaging with people. To not engage, to me, is like the most un-New York thing you could do, right? Like, even if it's an argument, even if it's not like, being able to quack, like, just crack back or like have a rebuttal to something that someone says. I've had fights with people outside unrelated to photography, where we're like cursing at each other and the guy says something funny and we both just laugh because it's like, okay, you got me, that was hilarious, you know what I mean? But like, that's part of the experience of being in New York, is things just have to fall off your shoulder. You know what I mean? You can't be afraid of people, and I appreciate diving in with them. You know what I mean? If I'm photographing, I want to be a part of the scene, which is why I choose to shoot 28 millimeters and 35 millimeters, because it makes me look like I'm from here. At least
Mm,
in my head, it does.
definitely. I always say when I go out in the streets, it's like I have a mouth that can get me into any conversation and out of any bad situation. It's
Boom, there it
you,
is.
you need it. You have to be able to kind of shuck and jive and jump
Hmm.
into stuff and jump out of stuff. Know when you're not in the right, or when you're in a situation that's a little dicey. Sometimes you gotta play dumb, or look, I
I
played
feel the same
tourist.
way. And to me, that's a badge of honor. Like, the fact that I know that I can talk my way into anything and out of anything is something that I've been honing for years. Acting class, New York, street smarts, photography. I'm just sharpening that blade more and more. And it was pretty awkward. I'm not going to lie. Like, you might think, and I tell people this all the time, I was incredibly uncomfortable when I first started photographing people. Asking someone for a portrait, there's still days where I just can't bring myself to talk to someone, even though I have it in me. So I also feel like, taking account for your mood, how you feel. Sometimes I feel vulnerable. I
Mm,
go outside with my camera and I just don't feel it. I'm not as confident as I was yesterday, or I might be tomorrow. And that's totally fine, because I know if I approach someone and they say no, that's going to impact my mood more than you might think. It'll ruin the entire day of shooting if I start approaching someone and someone says no to me. Um, but yeah, being
so
able to like, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was gonna say, how do you handle it? Do you force yourself into, like, if you're not feeling the engagement, is it something
Mhm.
where you'll just go shoot architecture or wander and see if something jumps out, and if nothing jumps out in 4 hours of wandering, you're just like, all right, whatever.
You'd be surprised. It's usually the people that bring me back.
Really?
Sometimes you just stumble, and it happens almost every time that I find myself kind of sunken in, you know, and I'll run into someone, and it'll be unrelated to photography, where we'll just have a normal conversation on the street, and I'll just say, yeah, can I take your portrait? You know, um, or I'll start doing, I have some YouTube videos online about how to approach people, and I say that there are difficulties when it comes to subjects, right? So there's like almost like a ranking system, right? So at the lower end, you have people that kind of can't beat you up, and, and street performers, right? So as you're going outside and you're photographing this type of people, I always say, kind of cut your teeth on people that are easier, right? You see a guy
Mhm.
walking outside with like, goldfish in his high heels, you know what I mean? Like he's rocking a pimp suit. He wants his photo taken, you know what I mean? A street performer, they want their photo taken. So I'll look for people like that to kind of get myself into the groove, to kind of approach the people that I feel like are going to say no, because I love asking people that are going to say no and then getting a yes. To me, that also makes my day when I'm out shooting.
It's the most gratifying feelings. It's like
Oh,
me
it's
when I
great.
when I was young, it was the, "Can I take this person? Can I take
Mm,
this person?" If it's
hmm.
a no, I'm not taking the picture. If I could take
Yeah.
them, then go
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah, I mean, you never know, and then it changes on you. When I was photographing in Baltimore, I have some pictures in there. One of the guys, Bobby, that I photographed, he was a dude, wearing like a Dickies two-piece. I was in the middle of nowhere in Baltimore with my expensive cameras, kind of like looking like a victim, and people were calling me out. Me and my homie were walking down the street, and they were like, "Yo, LA." I was like, "LA." I was so offended.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was like, New York, but so anyway, I would see people, and this fear, this irrational fear of making assumption about someone before you actually get to engage with them started to annoy me. So whenever I felt that nagging thing where it was like, oh, don't bother these people, I had to go over and engage. And those are some of my favorite portraits that I had taken at the time, just because it was like it represented a moment where I was just like, give everybody, the opportunity to surprise you, because you
Yeah.
don't know.
It's a victory. It's a victory when
Mhm.
it's almost like snatching victory out of the jaws of defeat when you
Mm.
thought you weren't gonna get anything, and then you overcome it and you're
Yeah.
rewarded for it.
Yeah.
Now, I actually wanna roll with that Baltimore theme right there because we did have a question that came in from Mr. Hayden Green, a friend of the show here, asking, "Does the way you shoot New York City influence how you shoot other cities? Are you trying to find the same feel?"
That's interesting. I mean, so as the famous Ralph Gibson would say, if you have a point of departure, then that can kind of take you anywhere. I know for me, it's about the people. So when I photograph other cities, there's a really great photographer named Bastian Woot who photographed Morocco. And his book, the way that he photographs it is the landscape, the objects, and then the people. So I always start with those three things, right? So if I'm in Baltimore or if I'm in Virginia and I notice there's an abundance of car shops, auto body shops, or whatever it might be, I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. I'm going to start photographing this. What does it seem to be like, the cuisine? What is it about this place that's like really interesting to me? And then you get closer to the people. So I always kind of start chipping away in that sense, thinking about how do I get closer to what inspires me here. But for me, it's always the people that feel like they've been there the longest. that for some weird reason, I'm so drawn to people that seem like natives to the space.
I mean, it goes hand in hand with storytelling, right? Who has more stories about where any city, you kind of had like these blocks, these generations, whereas you had New York, you can tell it by decades. The 70s distinct from the 80s, distinct from the 90s, distinct from the 2000s, and so forth.
Hmm.
Does that play into it as about telling a story, or is it more just a character based in an individual kind of way?
I think it's more buried in my subconscious than that. I think photography also for me has been a way to kind of own a little bit of the spaces that I enter. It'd be irresponsible or like a missed opportunity to ignore the fact that I'm a person of color photographing. And in a city like New York or anywhere that I travel in the world, it's hard to establish yourself or feel comfortable in a space until you interact with that space, right? And if I don't have a camera, how do I interact with that space? You know,
Mm.
how do I engage with the people? How do I break the ice, so to speak? Growing up in New York, you don't own anything, right? So hanging out on a corner is your best bet at kind of like creating some territory. So for me, I think when I see people occupying space in a city that they don't own, there's a certain thing that kind of like excites me about that, or like it resonates with me that I understand where they're coming from.
Mhm. This
So
kind of falls in line a little bit what you were saying. Hannah just asked the question here on Zoom. How does being a taller man of color affect how you engage with people who might be afraid of you or might have
Mm,
stereotypes. Have you found a distinct difference? And can we talk New York centric versus other places as well? Because a lot of people in New
yeah.
York don't realize how different it is than the rest of the country or the rest of the world.
Yeah, I think for me, that's something that's kind of always in the back of my mind. It's not something that I can possibly ignore. I think about it when I'm walking down the street late at night and someone's in front of me or whatever it might be as I'm approaching someone. But I do my best to kind of get that out of my head because I find that somehow I seem very approachable. And I don't know if that's other people fighting their fears or what it might be, because obviously I stand out like a sore thumb. I did a road trip on Route 66 across the country, and that was an incredibly weird experience to have cameras out in a foreign place where everybody has guns. And I say foreign place, and this is my country.
Mm,
But it was scary. Um, there's not much that I can do. I can just be myself, to be completely honest. I can't disarm people. I try my best, and this isn't just because I'm a person of color, but when I'm out photographing, I consider how I look, what I'm wearing, um, the way that I put myself out there. I don't dress too flashy. I don't want to stand out. I also don't want to look like I'm some cop in some like all blacked out stealth. Like, you know what I mean? I try to be presentable. I try to be even keeled because I do want people to open up to me. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I'm not trying to prove anything. I just want people to accept who I am and let me in. So I try to be as neutral as possible when I go out to photograph. I consider all the things. The shoes that I'm wearing, are they too flashy today? Is my jacket too bright? You know? So
I think
if
that's a
people are
great
not
point.
responding to you, then that's something you might want to consider.
Definitely. That neutrality. And it comes from obviously, the way that you're going to be looked at differently than I might be looked at walking down the street, but also from a photography perspective where you kind of do want to bury yourself in. And I think being able to embed yourself in an environment and coming out of your shell, so to speak, when you have that moment, I like to be a fly on the wall. And then if I am found out, like you said in the crosswalk, if somebody sees
Mhm,
you taking a shot or you find that moment that you want to engage, then it's like, okay, now I choose that I want to be seen.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Uh,
yeah, go for it, sorry.
now I was going to jump in. East Block Boy has a question here joining us on Zoom. What are you looking for on the street when you're taking images?
I kinda touched on this before, but it's I'm looking for people that kind of remind me of a version of New York that I I don't wanna say it's disappearing, but it's kinda being pushed to the outskirts. I live in the Lower
Mm,
East Side of Manhattan, and I have to walk pretty far, go to Brooklyn or go to kind of the edges of the city to find people that kind of represent this feeling that I get. And maybe I'm just copying somebody else's work. Maybe I'm more influenced by Bruce Davidson than I realize. Because, we all romanticize the old days of photography. We all want to be the legends.
mm,
And I think for me, New York is something that everybody kind of wants to own and manipulate and say this is it or this is that. And for me, this is my opportunity to tell you what New York is, right? So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the unmistakably New York people, and then I photograph that. That's always what I'm out when I'm like it's in the back of my mind when I go to photograph.
Does that come for scenes too, where I'm the same way, and you hit on it perfectly. New York is changing. It's way different than what I
Hmm.
remember it to be growing up in the '80s. The people are different. The layout's different. I just find everything's different about the city, and I find myself looking for scenes that remind me of that old New York.
Hmm.
And I constantly have to remind myself that, okay, well, this image might not be what I want now, but in 20, 30 years, it's gonna be something I'm gonna look back
Hmm.
on it the same way that I look at pictures from the '80s now.
Yeah,
Is that
indeed.
ever a thought with you?
Yeah, I mean, I still kind of like I'm very selective about what's in the frame because I don't like images that date themselves. I'll still take it while I share it, and I think that's part of the process too when you're thinking about putting out work that represents who you are. Is like, is everything acceptable? So kind of like honing that back. I shoot everything, and like maybe in 15 years, this thing that I didn't think was relevant now will be then, right? Like
Mhm.
everybody's lockdown photos, the pandemic, like nobody wants to see a mask photo right now. We don't want to watch a TV show about it. But in 20, 30 years, that's all going to be relevant again. Like people are going to be like, wait, what? That happened?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, shoot everything, right? But like you have to curate your work. You have to think about what your images are saying every time you put one out there into the world. You know what I mean? Because like You don't have to if you're just a hobbyist and you enjoy it. You know, it's my hobby as well, but I'm considerate of those things because I do want my photos to mean something now.
Where are you looking to take your images? I know you've worked on a number of different things, and I
Mhm.
do want to talk about your images that you had shot with Leica with this just beautiful commercial series, and we'll get to
Thank
look
you.
at those in a bit.
Yeah.
But is that something where do you see your work going more that trajectory and using street
Mm.
as like your personal, this is just for me?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because it's actually funny because if I'm being completely honest, sometimes I'm surprised at the places that I end up at. You know, I'm on this B&H podcast with you, and in the last few years, I've kind of pulled away from shooting photography commercially and assisting and doing all these things just because it felt very personal to me, and I enjoyed it, and I didn't want to. I'm doing fine shooting video. I don't have to make a life off of photography. I've learned video capabilities, and so most of my client work comes from video. So photography, street photography is a hard thing to make
Interesting.
money off of, right? Um,
Totally.
but I also do everything in my life to free up more time so that I can go outside and shoot. And I love that. I love that I can go shoot all day long. I look at the photos and I edit them, and there's no delivery. You know what I
It's
mean?
the
Like
best feeling, right?
there's no stress. It's just my images. It's my thing. And I don't put pressure on myself to say I need to have a book together right now because some of the people that I've loved the most that are inspiring as photographers weren't putting out books every day. You know, they didn't put their first book out until 10 years into the game. And I've only been photographing seriously for 4 years, maybe. You know what I mean? Like
That's
actually getting out and
insane.
photographing. So, um, yeah, books definitely for sure in the future. Movies, I've been doing some DP work as of late that I just don't share as well. I'm a mysterious guy. Maybe social media has forced me into the way of like being like I just hoard my work, and that's something that I need to confront because I do like some of it to be personal.
I mean, that's part of why we're here, right? We're talking
Yeah.
about inspiration and influence.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things that we have to balance and juggle as creatives of how much of ourselves do we give to our viewers? How
Hmm.
much do we care about that? And there's so many different schools of thought. I mean, is it something where you're not posting on Instagram every day? You got your images there. How do you treat social media in regards to your work as an artist?
Well, I think I treat it I treat it like a way to kind of like check in. I look at my stories as like a way to kind of it feels it's less permanent. It actually is, right? So
Mhm.
I share more on my stories just to be like, hey, I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm engaging with people. And I love when people write me and ask me questions. I answer as much as I possibly can, whether it be about a lens or this and that. I love the community of photography. I meet up with people and I shoot all the time, but I only choose to share specific images on my social media because I I don't it's not the best place to see an image, right? Which is kind of the reason why I love YouTube because I hope when people watch my videos that they're popping it up on their 50-inch screens or something like that, or at least a laptop, because I'll go and I'll think this photo is incredible. I'm sitting here editing at a 32-inch monitor, right? Like IPS display. Fantastic. I get it on my phone. And I'm like, this is trash. It doesn't convey. It doesn't mean anything. And I'm not gonna, I know, like I said, because of the way that I'm born into this through social media, unwinding these knots that I'm in, I
Mhm.
know that I equate my photos. It doesn't feel great when it doesn't get the engagement that I think it's gonna get, you know? I just want to roll around with a giant printout and be like, look at this instead. You know what I mean? I wish that was an option because I do it, but like, no.
It's
So I,
different in print. It's a tangible product.
yeah, but
And
it also is the detail,
the
right? It's
detail
like,
totally.
it's just you miss so much on Instagram, and that's fine. I'm now moving over to Twitter a little bit, where I got like 100 followers, and I just went through and deleted all my old tweets because it's me yelling at like video game companies and like airports for losing my luggage.
You're in the middle of a rebranding on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. I'm engaging. Maybe I'll sell an NFT. Who knows?
There you go. Well, you know what? I was gonna go there. We might have to circle back around on the NFT conversation later because it's like we're going from talking about books and prints to NFTs.
Yeah.
I mentioned your commercial project earlier, and I do want to bring that up because I've been waiting. I just want to hear you talk about this shoot and these images, just some
Oh yeah, for
amazing
sure, for
images
sure.
here. And
Thanks.
I'm kind of just going to scroll through here. And
Mhm.
we actually did have a question, another question from Hayden. Hayden says, rudimentary question: what lenses are in your bag? So if we could just take us through the entire gear setup. What kind of body are you shooting? What kind of body do you prefer? And then your lenses
Okay.
of choice.
So my three cameras that I use constantly right now are my Leica M11, and I have the 35 millimeter Summilux on that. That's glued together. And then on my M10R, I have 50 millimeter Samarit f1.5, which is an old vintage lens in case a portrait pops off. Sometimes I switch that out for the 75 Samarit, which is the 2.5 version. And then I also have my Leica SL2, which is doing this video feed right now with the 24 to 70 on that. And those are the three cameras that if I have that, honestly, all I need is this SL2 with the 24 to 70 and my M11 with the 35 or the M10R, and I'm good. If I just have those two on me, I can accomplish absolutely anything. And most of these photos that you're looking at here were shot with the SL2 and the 24 to 90. It's sometimes I switched out, I put a Noctilux on there, like this is a Noctilux on the SL2, I believe. Just because it's easier to focus at 0.95, it's almost impossible.
Mhm. Oh,
on,
definitely.
I have really bad eyes, so focusing a Noctilux on a rangefinder is like it's
Good
like
luck.
taking a shot in the dark. Yeah, literally.
Definitely.
Um,
So let's look through. I'm gonna scroll through some of these slowly, and if there's anything that I move too fast on, just back
yeah,
me
no
up here.
problem.
But how did this shoot come about? What's the shoot for? Just kind of
Yeah,
talk us through it.
so this is like a passion project and a directing project from Pride of Gypsies, which Jason Momoa's production company. This guy is one of the most on-brand people you'll ever meet. He only messes with a few brands, and that connection is incredibly strong. So we did these motorcycle shoots a couple, like a year apart. The first one was actually in Adirondacks, upstate New York, and we had Harley Davidson there, Red cameras, Leica camera, Guinness, and am I missing anything? I think that's it. Those are his four brands. Like those are his. So everything we do is in partnership with them. And he had me come out. I've known him for 15 years, but I only started photographing with him recently because he felt I finally earned my place to come and photograph with him, which is an honor. You know, I love having friends like that who, they make you kind of essentially bust your ass to earn it. He's not just handing out anything. And so I felt on these shoots I had something to prove. And shooting motorcycles is an interesting thing. um, your mind kind of goes to the grit and the chaos of it all. But as I said, my inspirations are the people that I assisted. So being on set with people like Norman Jean Roy and looking at his color palette, I wanted to create something that felt a little bit more elegant, even though we were photographing something that was so gruff, right? So to me, the colors that I chose to process these out with in the moments look like it could have been a Vogue spread, you know?
Oh
That's kind
yeah,
of what
that
I'm
that
after.
that's the first thing that jumps out to me is just the overall aesthetic, the feel of the images.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that because I've worked on these for a very long time, editing and trying to get the colors just right so that they had that feel. And it's also the moments that you choose to shoot. I didn't want it to just be your regular motorcycle photos. I wanted some elegance out of these moments, and that was a word that kind of stuck with me when I sat down thinking about, all right, how do I shoot this just a little bit differently? Obviously, there's not so much that you can do um, when you're not, you're chasing bikes down all day long
Oh,
and it's a
definitely.
hundred and some degrees outside. But it's what you decide to share from what you've captured that also helps. As long as you know what it is that you're trying to create, which is why I constantly say, create the mood boards, create the inspiration boards, because it's almost difficult to know if you're getting what you want unless you have that setup saying this is what I'm after. It makes it easier to know that you're getting it, you know.
Definitely. Now, how is your mindset different going on a commercial shoot like this than if you're just out on the street?
My mindset is bring everything that I need.
Don't leave anything home.
Bring everything you need and get bold. I'm introduced to these dudes who, like, these guys race all over the world. They're legends. You know what I mean? They've won races from, like, they do all this stuff. They're actually riding on ice in the lake here. You know what I mean? They actually do this stuff. So you meet these dudes and it's a bunch of intimidating guys, and, like, you're asking them for portraits,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So it's like you got to really step it up and bring the confidence to a pack of people like this, where it's just kind of like, okay, I'm the photographer. I have to take up space and I have to command the room. I can't sit here and be like, like, may I take this photo? No, this is now you're set, right? So you have your tools. Your tools hopefully work and you can trust them and rely on them. This is the SL2 autofocus with the 24 to 90, which this guy is like ripping by, skidding on the ice, kicking up water that was melting from it. and I caught this with the autofocus on that camera, which is, I mean, after this shoot, the SL2 became one of the best cameras I've ever used. I fell in love with it in a way that like I didn't think I could, and that's what brought me to use it on the desert shoots as well.
Interesting. I mean, these images
Yeah,
are just a beautiful, beautiful feel.
thank you, thank you.
I'm going to jump back in. I know we got some questions coming in here. Austin Park said, having heard Ralph talk about the point of departure a lot, I'm curious, what are some points of departure that you have identified and followed? I'm working to form my own point of departure.
Yeah, I mean, look, when Ralph talks about the point of departure, one of the things that he also says is that Dorothea Lange said that to him, and he still kind of like didn't do anything for 7 years. You know what I mean? Like he heard that and was like, interesting, and still had no clue what he was doing for 7 years. So I think, you know, it's something that you should constantly be chewing on, and like don't knock yourself for not being able to answer that question fully. For me, I always say that my point of departure are the people. If I focus on the people, then my photography to me is not a failure. If I make sure to go after the people that I'm interested in, then I can't fail. And I know that sounds really broad, right? But I know what my definition of people means. It's the New Yorkers, it's the unmistakable New Yorkers. So, whatever that definition is for you, which it's obviously going to change, just know that, and that can be your starting point for now. Because, I'm relatively new in this game, right? I have so much more to shoot, and I know my work is going to get better because I'm out shooting every single day. But I try my best not to let social media and the fact that other people seem to be getting more success or making more connections influence the way that my pace is determined, right? I'm going to move at my pace, and you should feel comfortable doing that too, because not everybody is on a rocket.
Yeah, I mean, that speaks to who you are as a person and also translates to your photography as well. I feel that you handle there's a certain style that you have, and in comparing the commercial work to your street work, you see that your style, while it's you kind of morph to tell the story and give the certain aesthetic
Mm,
of each individual character. And I love that about your work is, it's not, there's some people, what you're going to get, and it's kind of cookie cutter,
mm.
as yours, it's like more of a chameleon like quality of melding in with the subject, which I love.
Well, street photography to me feels like something that I am not ready to abstract yet. Yet, I'm just not confident enough in my ability to take street photography to a place that like I can do weird stuff with it yet, because I haven't figured out what I'm doing yet with the style that I have. But when you do something a little bit more commercial, or if you're taking portraits, that's your opportunity to kind of flex a little bit and get a little bit more experimental, and those projects stand alone, right? So they don't have to be tied to your other work. You can do something that's a little bit different. So whenever I get those opportunities, I seize them to try something a little bit different, or color grade a little bit different. Color grading is a big part of my process, and this is something that I used to feel pretty awkward about, because when we speak on inspiration versus influence, a lot of the things that you might hear are people saying, "Oh, I don't edit, I don't crop, I don't do any of this stuff." But if we go back and look at what the legends did, they edited, they cropped, they did all these things. So again, it's like, are you going to be influenced, or are you going to seek actual inspiration? One of the things that I realized too, in watching Bruce Gilden speak and reading interviews and looking at his book, or even Bruce Davidson, they both approach subjects from time to time. One of Bruce Gilden's most famous photographs of the two men in Japan lighting up a cigarette, he asked them to do that again because he saw them doing it from a window. And it's like, I don't care. If you understand what you're after and the subjects are strong and the image is strong, that's typically all that matters. Now, I'm not saying go put your friend in a trench coat and a fedora. Shout out to Hanad. And photograph them. But I'm saying that, you have to be receptive to the streets, and street photography means being prepared under circumstances that you cannot control, right? So if those two people still exist in space and they're doing something that's true and you capture it, that's totally fine. You want to process your images, create your own rules, and don't listen to the internet.
Never, never. I mean, you're clearly solidified, especially for you. You keep saying how you haven't been in the game that long, and for you to have that vision, that intuition, it's a very mature point of view that you have, to be so centered on what you offer, what you're bringing, what you're trying to bring, and balancing that inspiration and that influence. Because there's a lot of people, the first 3, 4, 5, some people 10 years of
Mm.
their photography journey is spent chasing trends. Social media, I feel, can expedite that, where it's like a catalyst for people jumping on what's popular.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to do that, and I'm guilty of it too. I have been guilty of it too, and that was from a time when I wasn't investing in information in books. If I'm not photographing, I'm thinking about photography. I start the day with a coffee and a book. I have a wall full of photo books over here that I constantly reference, and I read what the photographers had to say because that's the source. Don't let other people be the source of information for you. You know what I mean? Like the books exist, the people exist, and I think a lot of people that kind of get caught up in those things are not really thinking about what came before them. They don't have a bunch of photography books that they're tapped into, and I think that's so important. It's going to help you figure out your way as an artist.
Definitely. Now, how do you handle the sensitive topics of the streets? It's one of
Mm,
those things that always comes up when we talk street photography.
ethics.
And when you go into sketchy neighborhoods, you have people who don't want their picture taken. You
Hmm.
have homeless is a very divisive topic, especially in New York City with the growing homeless population and all the mental
Hmm.
health issues that we see out there in the streets. How do you approach these topics?
Um, I try to portray everybody I photograph with their integrity. I'm not out here trying to make anybody look a particular way, and that could mean a homeless man can look proud, you know. Um, and that's kind of the moments that I go for because I'm more attracted to that. This gentleman happens to be homeless, and he was wearing three hats in the wintertime, and we kind of spoke for a little bit, and I asked him for a portrait, and this is kind of what I got. There's a million different ways that you can photograph this individual to make him look down and out. You can make him look elegant. You can make him look proud. There's so much that you can do, but the reality is, and I think this is why it's difficult, is that like truth in photography is a really hard topic for me because this is the moment that I had with this gentleman. And I'm sure if I came back another day, he could be down and out and somebody else might photograph that. And that's now his truth because it just got shared on social media, right? Which one is
Mm,
actually true? Well, who knows? This is just my perception. This is the way that I like to see people. And this is the way that I like to portray my people. So, do I judge other people for doing whatever they want? I'm not the type of person that's going to like talk down on what Bruce Gilden does. I understand his background and his compulsion and the way that he creates. And I'm glad that his photos exist. Um, it's an art form to me, it's a study of people. And I think even though I'm engaging with this guy, just the look on his face, we all understand who he is. His phone posits, you know what I mean? The way his hat is on his knee, we all know where he's from. We know this guy. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people that are going to show me who they are from their eyes, their clothes, their posture. And
how
that's
do you
that's my approach.
how do you work? I mean, an image like this, one thing that stands out with your images, and this is one of the images that I really love it, and in this image right here is the expression
Mm,
of your subjects. I think that's such an understated
mm, mm.
part of taking an image is the wrong expression doesn't sell an image the way that just there's just something there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, for sure. I mean, it's I will say it's more looking for the people that have that expression rather than getting someone to that expression, right?
Mm,
So,
interesting.
um, I'm this is subject selection when you're shooting models, right? And you're doing a test shoot. I quickly learned that the model that I picked represented me as well and my style and my taste, right? So when I'm outside photographing subjects in the street, the subjects that I choose represent me as well as an artist. So I'm looking for very specific type of people who have something in their eyes that feel like they're talking to me. And um, I think maybe some of that comes from my acting experience because that kept me out in the streets, just listening to conversations and watching people long enough that I felt perceptive to understand what someone was conveying or going through. And I have a sensitivity to those things. And maybe that's why I don't um, kind of make people, I'm not out there trying to make people look bad when I take photos, is because I do have a sensitivity to the human condition, the experience in a sense.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's the individual, it's not me. I just make sure that I'm honest. Before I approach someone and I take a photo of them, I know exactly why I want it. And I tell them, I'm not going up there and just being like, "Hey, can I get a photo of you?" and then making it up from there. I see them and I say, "I want this photo because of this thing," you know? and then
Interesting.
that's how I get it. And that was my first photo, street photo ever taken
Was
with
it?
the Canon, the yellow one.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm like, damn, you came
No,
out
this one's with
firing,
the
man.
Leica. Yeah, I know. This was my first street image, which when you think about it, it's this. It's like this is a very popular style of photography, right?
Yeah,
If you
totally.
don't buy books, if you don't do research, if you're not interested in the past, then predominantly this is what you're going to see online. And if you don't break out of that, how will you know what you actually like? And there's nothing wrong with this style, but this style influences a lot of people to create work that maybe they don't care about. Maybe they could move past that and make something that's meaningful to them if they did the research.
One of the questions I get asked a lot is people who have trouble finding their passion and
Mm.
what they're passionate about in photography. You know what you're passionate about. I know what I'm passionate about. It was a journey to get there and it just kind of happened. How do you, are you able to suggest to others a way to tap into what they're passionate about
With photography
with
or
photography?
just
Yeah.
passion? Oh yeah.
In regards to taking images.
Uh, I mean, I think the process is the same for a lot of people, and it's shoot everything under the sun. Shoot it all, shoot it all, shoot it all. When I first got my camera and I got obsessed with taking pictures, I'd take pictures of flowers, and I still do, but it has to be the right flower now, like the things that don't matter to me fall away eventually, and it just comes from time and a compulsion of shooting. um, I go out and photograph every day, and if you're passionate about it, then photography will kind of just reveal to you the things that you care about the most. And the beauty of photography, which sounds really cliche, is that it will reveal what is beautiful to you because you didn't know that originally, right? You'll catch yourself kind of gazing off at things when you don't. You want to be inspired, leave your camera at home. Like you will see all the things that you are so moved by in the world: a blade of grass, beam of light, a person eating a hot dog, whatever it might be. It's all going to look so appealing, and you're going to be changed forever if you just keep shooting.
Do you ever go out without a camera or no?
On occasion, I'll go outside without a camera. It's so rare.
Is it like
Um,
FOMO? You feel naked just walking around, not able to take a picture, or worried that you're gonna miss that one shot?
Sometimes when I walk my dog, I'm like, I don't need to bring my camera, and then we'll do like a big loop around the block, and I'm like, oh god, I should have brought my camera. But I also don't like taking pictures with her because she's super impatient. So,
It's like you got to
um,
separate. You got to draw a line
yeah,
there.
but she's also like a weird little cute alien looking dog, and she is too influential on the subjects. So I never get good photos when I have her. I've brought her out before and like tried to photograph all over the city. I was like, oh, she'll be a good icebreaker. No, she just distracted people, and everybody was just in
Really?
this pleasant mood all the time. Everybody's cheesing in the photographs. I'm like, I don't want people cheesing ear to ear in all my photographs. So,
No, kills the
uh,
vibe. They
yeah,
just
exactly.
portfolio killers.
Yeah, I'm like,
Uh,
you gotta take it easy, Taquito.
Josiah Myers joining us on Zoom from Moto Coast, asking if you're
Oh, so
shooting any film these days.
actually, I have a ton of film in my fridge, and yeah, I just bought some film. Somebody started rolling. What was it? Kodak Vision 3 that I'm gonna start shooting. I'm gonna move
Oh,
to
nice.
that, and I've just bought some medium format Portra for a really good price. So I got a couple of that stacked in the fridge. Just waiting for the right moments. In this moment, the way that I treat film, I don't shoot it every day. Um, just because it's a bit redundant. And sometimes when I bring two cameras out to shoot, I'll bring one film and I'll bring one digital, and I just throw the film in the fridge for long term. In a couple of years, I'll process it all, and it won't feel as redundant because I do like to capture both film and digital sometimes. If film is a bit more romantic to me these days.
What's
So,
your favorite film stock? Do you have one?
oh, Tri-X. I would shoot that all
Oh,
day long.
nice.
Yeah, yeah.
That's interesting. I never. That probably would have been on the bottom of the list of my guesses for you. You
Really,
have because you have
film
such
to me in black and white is just I
it's
just love it.
different, but I feel
Yeah.
like you have such a good control over like you see colors. When I look at people's images, I
Mhm,
can be like, okay, this person sees scenes with colors very well. Because there's a
mhm.
lot of people, it's just like black and white's an easy get out of jail free card.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
bailout for a lot of people.
Mhm.
And look, we all do it. I do it sometimes. If I'm moved by a scene, but the colors are distracting, okay,
Yeah.
black and white.
Well,
But
see, this is why it's the exact opposite. It's close to what you think, but it's the flip side of it. Oh God, this is so this is going to be incendiary, but colored film, even though I love it, I love the way Portrait looks. I see people their film files, they're absolutely incredible. essentially they are filters, right? I am somebody that I love color. I love to control my own color. So if I got film stock that's in color, there's only so much that I can do with that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So for me, shooting black and white film and then manipulating my images digitally in color makes the most sense because I want my reds to look specific, my greens, my blues. But on film, they're kind of determining that for me, and I don't want anybody to determine my look. So
We did tap into that whole
yeah.
film is the original preset. Like I love when people, people argue online about like I don't use presets, and then they're posting, and then they're all like hashtag portrait 400. I'm like,
Yeah, Portrait
you
400.
you use
Okay.
the OG preset.
Yeah. And the lab also selected your colors. They processed it, put the curve on it for you. So somebody's
Yeah,
editing your photos.
definitely. Somebody just posted that. I actually, my algorithm is scary because it was right after we got off the phone, and I saw someone post a meme like that. Whereas, yeah, you like what you said, the film stock you're choosing, the lab is they're still processing your image.
They
I
have
think it
to. They
was,
process it. It looks flat when it comes out. You can get a
yeah.
flat one. You can, yeah. So
uh,
somebody's got to do something. I prefer to do it myself.
You make a good point there. We're gonna that's like that topic, you could just dive in and go into colors and filters and presets and get lost in the woods
Yeah,
on
I
that
mean, I
one.
love it. I love it. I'm absolutely obsessed with some of the colors, but they inspire me, and I can probably recreate those colors because I learned from some of the best people that
Mhm.
process color and light and on set when I was assisting, and so I enjoy that process a lot.
Now, my man Vince Mejia tapped in. He wants to know what's your favorite season to shoot in New York City.
Oh, my favorite season is definitely the summertime because people come out and things get wild. And a photograph where you could feel the heat. There's nothing like that. You know what I mean? In New York City, you feel the heat. It's like it's radiating off the car windows. It's like coming off the ground, the concrete, and people just kind of lose their minds a little bit. They're a little more free, and they express themselves in a way that they don't usually the rest of the year. So
What's the quintessential New York City summer photo opportunity for people that don't live in New York? If
yeah.
you could show them an image of one scene, what says New York summer to you?
Oh man, I'm trying to think who shot this photo now. It's not my image, but it's it's the guy holding the book and the pit bull's attached to it, and he's swinging him around. I'm totally blanking on whose image that is. You know what I'm
No,
talking
if
about,
I
right?
know that I know the image, and
Yeah.
if anybody out there knows the image, the
God, I'm
photographer,
so mad I'm blanking
tap
on
in right
this.
now. But I know exactly the image you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And then all
Um,
the fire hydrant, one of the ones that I dropped in the mood board, Louis Draper with the fire hydrant, the kids playing in the fire hydrant, like anything like that is so New York to me, in summertime. Love it.
Definitely, definitely. Cyber Mike is asking, when are you going to get that bold Leica tattoo?
I might
Is that
already
on the
have it now.
horizon?
Could you imagine? Listen, I want a camera tattoo. I want something photography related, but I just cannot find anything that's unique enough.
It's like finding it unique, and then if it's like you're putting it on your body. So I
Yeah.
feel like it's one of those things. Camera tattoos are a fine line
Mm.
between like, yeah, that's dope, that's unique, or hell no, you why
Yeah.
did you put that on
At
your
this
body?
point, it's all been done. Maybe I'll do a bunch of little red dot freckles on my face. So a little like a love.
A little like a logo on the
Yeah.
cheek there. Never hurt anybody. What about city wise? How much do you travel? We have a question in here. What city have you not photographed in but would love to, and why?
Oh man. Whew. Uh all the places that I traveled before I photographed. Thailand was why when I went to Thailand, that was incredible. And I wish I owned a camera there. But like the south of France where my girlfriend's family lives in Toulouse, Montpellier, those places were so beautiful. And when you talk about people that look like they've been there forever, you know what I mean? Like the old
Mm.
farm equipment, the farmers, that kind of thing. I loved those moments, and I think about those moments all the time. And I'm like, why didn't you own a camera? It almost feels like everything before 29, or I don't even remember, like maybe 30, 31. Everything before that's irrelevant because I didn't own a camera.
It didn't matter because you didn't
It
get to
doesn't
take
matter.
pictures of it.
Yeah, it's like so if I can go back to south of France, which I will, and photograph all of her uncles and extended family, I'll do that.
Mhm. Now, you talked extensively about that time of life that never existed before you owned a camera,
Mm.
and also the occasional time that you don't have a camera when you're walking the dog. So Eddie wants to know, what inspiration do you have outside of photography?
Oh, what inspiration do I
Do you
have
find
outside of
is I mean, is there anybody that inspires you as a person, or
Hmm.
anything that you do that keeps you centered as a person,
Hmm.
non-photography related?
That's really interesting. Hmm.
We're
I mean,
bending you in
obviously, I
all
watch
directions
films.
here.
I mean, that's like pretty obvious. We all watch films for inspiration and things like that. But that's a good question, and I think that that's maybe something that I need to explore a bit more is finding people that are like more artisans in my life. That's one of the issues I think in growing up in New York is for all the things that are incredible about growing up here in the city that affords you, you don't really learn to play an instrument in your apartment. You know what I mean? Like a lot
Mm.
of people don't own. I don't have a ton. I have friends that are artists that don't have like you think about people in California who photograph their artist friends in these giant warehouses and they're painting and it's like they can do like 16 by 30 canvases and you're like, wait, what? like. In New York, I do find it a bit harder, but I do have friends. There's a guy I recently met, Eric Ellington, who's a legendary skateboarder who I've known of because of KCDC, and I appreciate people like him, and also a good friend of mine, Gadjin Balan, who's like their mentality for business, their hustle is just like nothing I've ever seen, and they're constantly blowing my mind with ways that they think about reinventing themselves or pushing their businesses forward with photography or clothes or anything like that. So I'm interested in people that think about how to advance their brands. Um, that's always
Awesome.
inspiring to me.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap this hour up, Jason, I want to thank you again. And I want, this is your time. Any plugs on any projects? Where can we find your work?
Yeah, so I still keep up my YouTube channel. It's kind of gone through a little bit of a transformation these days. And uh now it's a bit more of like a Daniel Arnold type vibe where things are just kind of zooming in and out and like old school home footage vibes. So I'm dropping an M11 video. I wasn't able to do that recently, but it should be coming out in the next couple days. And it's my experience shooting with the camera because I don't necessarily do camera reviews, but it's all just hands-on stuff. And yeah, just Instagram and stuff like that. I have a short film that I shot recently coming out this year. I'm doing a lot of things. So if you just keep up with me on Instagram, you'll see a bunch of this stuff coming out in the next couple months. So
Awesome. Now, Victor Almonte, hero of the hour. I think you did hit the nail on the head. I don't have the opportunity to check this right now, but I do think you nailed it. The Pitbull photo says, he said it might be Jamel Shabazz.
Jamel
I'm pretty
Shabazz.
sure it's Jamel
It
Shabazz.
is Jamel Shabazz. Yeah, that's a
There we
great
go.
photo.
Man, Victor, I wish we had, some gift, some handout here to
Yeah, I
throw you,
know,
but
right? You just
that's it.
won, bro.
Yeah. Well, Jason, this was awesome, man. I mean, it's really great to get inside your head. And when I talk to you about photography, it's just so natural. It's so easy. And listening to you talk, you're the type of person that even when you don't probably even realize it, you're dropping gems. So we came here talking about inspiration, and I'm sure there's a ton of people out there listening who, even if they have never heard your name before, they're going to be fans, followers, and people who are inspired by you and what you bring to the game. So I want to thank you again, man. This is awesome.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you sharing space and doing this with me. It means a lot to have somebody like you who takes incredible photographs as well interview me and ask questions because that's always fascinating. And I think this is the best way to talk about photography as a conversation. So thank you to B&H. Also, thank you to Leica. Shout out to Kieran for setting this up and letting me have this space with you.
Yes, I couldn't say it any better. Huge shout out to Leica for sponsoring today's event and everybody over there, Richard, Karen, who helped make this happen. But Jason, look, they Leica gifted me the gift of getting to see your work. That's actually the first time I saw your work, and it's funny because I'm always in your hood shooting. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
like, I'm
know. We're
glad
gonna
I
have to
got to know
link
you now.
eventually.
Yeah, right. I'm like, man, glad I didn't run into you on different circumstances. I would have been
Mhm.
sizing you up for my can I take him before I take a picture of him?
Yeah, I need to do headshots or whatever.
There we go. We'll have to link one day, but huge thank you again. And also all of our viewers, you guys had some great questions. Make sure you follow Jason, bump that YouTube up, go increase that Twitter following, and definitely hit him on Instagram. But that's all we have for now. Huge thank you again to Leica, Jason Roman for joining us. This is another round of the B&H virtual event space in the books. Catch y'all next time.
Peace, everybody.